Ottoborg. Quater made a king named Ottoborg, designed to be happy and full of joy all day. Robots were a subject that Ottoborg had done a lot of research on, so it was only natural that he made 3 robots to help him make 7 little houses. The robots' names were Appy, Togor, and Bill. Appy was good at digging, Bill was good at building, and Togor was good at painting. That is why it is said today that if anyone is a good painter, he is Togor. In a very careless way, Ottoborg made 7 boys to live in his new houses. The boys' names were Hypin Nupin, Petri Alfonso, Willie Trombone, Allo Al, Daridius Hapsicum, whose nickname was Cricker, Hondo, and Ed. Ottoborg's sons were easily identified by the loop formed on the top of each of their heads. Sometimes when they walked along, they would hook their head hoops on branches and hang there for days. Petri was so tired of getting his head hooked onto things that he cut his own head off, which proved to be fatal. Ottoborg had forgotten to hold his world together with gravity, so one day his world fell apart in chunks, and his 7 sons and 3 robots floated aimlessly across creation. Hypin's chunk of land got caught in the tail of the comet Pyrogeorge, named Pyrogeorge because it decreased in size during each orbit. The tail of Pyrogeorge was full of seeds because the comet once passed through the atmosphere of the planet Burpee. Hypin cultivated his chunk so that he would grow flowers. He loved flowers and how happy and festive they can make a place. Often he would make a wreath of some of the flowers to decorate the loop in his head. Since he was the only one of his brothers with a nose, it seemed especially fitting that this is where Hypin Nupin's chunk of land should be. He grew an extraordinary amount of flowers, but after a few years it was not enough to satisfy his growing craving for flowers. His deepest burning desire was to be the king of flowers, to have no rival in growing flowers. He actually did not know of anyone else who was growing flowers, but his unfettered imagination went wild, and he thought that there must be others who were cultivating and growing huge fields of flowers on the many planets and worlds he passed. Year after year, Hypin worked the soil of his chunk of land to try and get it to produce more and more flowers. He developed fertilizers and plant foods. He grew nothing but flowers, though there were plenty of other types of seeds he could have planted. If he did notice some other type of plant growing amongst the flowers, he violently ripped it from the ground, cursing it and tearing it to shreds, then throwing it into his compost pile. It was so upsetting to him that he would have to lie down for a nap afterwards. But no matter how many flowers the land produced, it was never enough for Hypin. It almost seemed that the chunk of land was desperately trying to please its obsessed master, straining itself year in, year out, to produce more flowers than it had the previous season. For many centuries, in fact, it did outperform itself. Each year a dozen or so more flowers were produced. And Hypin would ask, "Is that all?" Then the yield began to decrease. The land was simply overworked, and it needed to rest. Hypin reacted by pressing the land harder and harder to yield more. It was aggravating to no end.